Today on the Athletes Only podcast, I sit down with three-time Olympic medalist and 50 freestyle world champion, Cam McEvoy. This Australian sprinter is making waves in the sport of swimming for his unique method of training, which focuses on race-specific training that's backed by psychology, physics, and mathematics, all of which Cam helped develop. Cam is one of the fastest swimmers on the planet with a career best time in the 50 freestyle of a 21.0, making him the second fastest swimmer in the history of the event. With Cam's eyes set on the 2024 Paris Olympic Games, he looks to take the world by storm in the fastest event in the sport of swimming, with a goal of breaking the 50 freestyle world record. Without further ado, here's my guest, Australian sprinter, Cam McEvoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a very special guest today on the Athletes Only podcast, world champion swimmer, Australia's finest, Mr. Cam McEvoy. Thank you so much for jumping on today to chat with us.
No worries. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, of course. Well, like we were chatting a little bit before, I've been following your career for a while. I'm sure swimming fans across the world have come to know you for your speed, your really relentless training, your interesting training style as well, I guess, very sprint oriented. I've heard all about it, but would love to kind of rewind a little bit to the start of your career. Just tell me a little bit more about, how you got into the sport of swimming, and a little bit about your, background.
So I got into swimming because my older brother at the time had his school carnival. I think it was grade 4 is the first year you had it at our school. And I think he got third age champion overall. Hadn't done, aside from like swimming in the ocean, hadn't done a drop of like squad training or anything. And I think just from there, he just got so excited about it. He wanted to go and join. And then me being 3 years younger than him, I just went along with it. And so I pretty much, I joined a squad when I was, I think 4, maybe 5.
Wow.
At Miami Swimming Club. And that was when, that was 1998. Yeah, that was my starting beginnings there. When I hit 7, I got put up to the next squad. And from like 7 until I was about 11, I was in that group. And then, hit some big training sessions in that block. When I was 13, that's when I got to train alongside Chung Lin, who is the current 800 freestyle world record holder. And so I saw a lot of crazy sessions being done at the time. Effectively what I'm trying to say is from the get-go, from 4 or 5 years old, all the way through into my teens, I got to watch the best in the sport train at very insane levels. And so I had a very, very good understanding of what hard training was like.
After the 2021 Tokyo Olympic Games, Cam took 12 months out of the pool to reevaluate the way he trained for the sport of swimming. Traditionally, coaches will push swimmers to build up an aerobic base or a high volume of swimming, and then taper them into race-specific swimming after a couple of months. Well, Cam decided to take a completely different approach. He studied all assets of other sports outside of swimming and then built this back into a training program that worked for him. So after 12 months out of the pool, the question still remains: what brought Cam McEvoy back to the sport of swimming?
Yeah, so effectively, by the time Tokyo hit, I was pretty significantly deep inside like a burnout phase, which I would say probably has its roots all the way back, even pre-Rio, pre-2016, where it was just within Australian swimming, it was just culturally accepted that every year you kind of have your 3-week break and then you're straight back into it. And if you have any longer than that, then you should really seriously think about like how much you're taking the following year's competition seriously. And I went 18 years effectively in a row where I only had 3 weeks off, maximum a year, barring 2014 where I had 4 weeks. And so it's just that in itself was an exceedingly long period of time of doing the same type of work year in, year out as well. And so I got to 2021, severely burnt out, And I had spent from 2016 until 2021 basically trying to turn heaven and earth in terms of figuring out why every year I'll come back into the sport. I'll put in as much as I possibly can into every session, and I'll get to the end of the season and take a step back. And every year it was one step back, one step back. It was zero progress. And so just across the board, severely just not there, not enjoying it. And over that period of time, I did learn a lot, and I was doing my best to, I guess, vocalize and try and get a collaborative approach to narrow in on testing out a few different approaches that I could take that might have an effect. But it was always met with a brick wall, effectively. And there was never any space to allow an athlete's, I guess, perspective to then flow into the general flow of every season. And so, hit Tokyo, decided to have an indefinite amount of time away from the pool. I wasn't even sure if I was going to come back after Tokyo. And effectively, I just dived into everything else that I've been thinking about in the years prior to that, and just wanting to learn as much as I could about particular other sports, how they approach things, their philosophy, their context. Initially, not with the idea of, okay, how can I use this for swimming? But I noticed that every new sport that I kind of got into, I got to a point where I understood it enough to then unconsciously start asking myself, how can this be contextualized into swimming? And I spent, it's about a month in mid to late probably mid 2022, where I felt like I'd had enough information, and I just compiled it all into a few PDF documents. I sent that out to a few people that I trusted and respected their outlooks. And then basically by the time it rolled around to where I was ready to get in the water and give this a go, it was October 2022. The only place in Australia that I found that could give me the space and the place to then do this in the way that I envisioned it was with Tim Lane in Brisbane. So I packed up my stuff in Sydney, moved to Brisbane, kick-started first week of October, started with a 50 freestyle actually, just to get a baseline. I think I went 22.8, and then got into training then. And then, within 9 months, Worlds had rolled around. I moved that 22.8 to a 21.0. And it just worked far better and far faster than I imagined it would have.
I'm sitting here chuckling to myself, like taking 2 years off of the sport of swimming, effectively 2 years, post Olympics, and then jumping back in and going at 22.8, just like, after not swimming, like, anyone who competes in the sport of swimming will know that is very unfathomable. So I think, even being in the 22s, you could definitely tell that there was something coming down the line.
As you can see, Cam's like a mad scientist in the pool, constantly reevaluating and adjusting his training. Which got me thinking, how much training does Cam McEvoy do for a 50 freestyle, and what's his mindset going into the 2024 Paris Olympic Games with all of Australia's eyes on him?
So I shifted it. Swimming is very collapsed into a physiological approach, which has had extreme success. Obviously, you can see where the sport has come from, but it's not only physiological. And so I shifted the viewpoint from that to one of almost like a strength-based skill, akin to how I imagine, say, the two different, I guess, metaphors of exercise that are similar. One would be like a gymnast ring routine. Say they have a 30-second ring routine, and that is just pure strength endurance. Another one would be, imagine if this is really easy to imagine one-to-one to say butterfly, but freestyle, same thing. Imagine if your sport, at the end of your season, your main race was 20 pull-ups with 30 kilos, full range of motion as fast as you can. And if you were to approach that type of event, you're more than likely going to approach it from a strength point of view, from a max strength, from a strength endurance point of view. You're going to periodize it the same way you would with gym. You're not going to look at it as, okay, this is going to take 18 seconds, and so you need to increase your anaerobic output here. You need to do a certain amount of aerobic training so that you can back up these anaerobic efforts in the gym. You don't even worry about that. You just look at it from that strength point of view, which then underneath it preemptively encapsulates the physiological profile of what you need anyway, and you go from there. And so I've used that type of approach and just layer that over what a 50 freestyle is. And the context is obviously the technique is very different to a pull-up. But outside of that, I think it's very one-to-one. And so everything I do moving forward is just kind of running the same playbook as if I would do something like that. That's a crude analysis of it, but I think it paints a pretty good picture.
In preparation, for the 2024 Olympic Games, obviously you got to qualify at your guys' trials first, but many would, look at you and say, hey, he's coming off of a world championship. He is arguably Australia's best chance at the gold in the 50 freestyle. What does that do for your mindset? And what is your mindset going into the trials and presumptively the 2024 Olympic Games? How do you manage that expectations and also, keep that level head?
For me, I guess it comes back to firmly grounding it within the approach I'm taking. From when I started back until Fukuoka, it was very much one of an experimentation approach. No one had done an approach like that. We didn't really know how we would respond as the period went on, and also with taper and just overall. Mm-hmm. And so because it was so successful, but because it was still so much in its infancy, the approach, it's really just finish Fukuoka, get back into the water straight away and just compound that type of approach. Do that until Doha, reconsolidate, and then just compound the same approach. And so really it's just a continuation of what we have done since we've started back in the water. It's not so much just about getting on the blocks, hitting a certain time, hitting a certain place on the podium, but it's also kind of uncovering as much new ground as we can. We think so far it's already very positive. And so whatever the outcome is there, just trying to consolidate as much of that as we can, and then putting it out there into the world, and hopefully having that help a lot of other people who were in a very similar position. Hopefully at some point it can be given back and progress that sport that little bit further, at least in sprinting.
While Cam modifies his training on a weekly basis, one thing that has stuck with him since 2019 is Team Finis. I got to try out Finis' new Hydro X tech suit that Cam has been wearing in all of his races and all of his practices, and let me tell you, it's a game changer for sprinters. I mean, that's the suit that he wore to win the 2023 World Championship in the 50 freestyle. Something's got to be working, right? Here's what Cam had to say about his partnership with Team Finis.
So I first got on board with Team Finis back in 2019, and just looking at the trajectory of my career, especially over that time up until coming back in 2022, it wasn't great, especially relative to how it started.
Sure.
But regardless of that, they were there for me the whole time. Didn't bother them. They still supported me. They backed me throughout that period, even in my year off when I wasn't sure what was really going on. That was still there in the background. Yep, if you need us, we can help you out. Take your time doing your thing. And so that type of support goes a very, very long way. And then knowing that they've been there during that period of my career relative to where I am now, I'm more than appreciative of it all. But yeah, that aside, I think I could probably count on two hands how many times I haven't suited up in this prep for Doha. I've worn the Hydro X so much now. The first time I actually wore it in a race in May 2023 was the first time I went sub 22 on my comeback from the time period off. And it was the first time I've done 21 since 2019. So I'm really enjoying the suit. I'm throwing down some really nice times in training over 25, 35, etc. Under electronic timing. And like I said, I've worn the suit weekly, multiple times a week, 2+ hours per session. Never had any rip on me. They all still feel really good. They're all definitely fast. Like I'm still posting good times with them. And so, yeah, definitely one of the best suits I've ever worn. And it's the only suit that I've actually ever stress tested to this amount. And I would probably say that it's probably the only suit that's ever been stress tested to this amount in the history of the sport, just with the sheer amount of times that I wear it and have it under the microscope with the data and everything. So, yeah, it's exceptional.
Before I let Cam go, I wanted him to share his secrets to 50 freestyle success. His answers made me rethink everything about how I approached sprint training. All swimmers watching, it's time to listen up.
I'd love to get, for all the aspiring sprinters out there in the world, I'd love to hear what your tips are, to master sprint freestyle in this day and age, based on the type of training that you're doing and everything around that.
So my first tip, and the most important one, and I would say this comes before any form of work that you do, whether that's what I'm doing, variation of that, traditional approach, doesn't matter. Everything all of your training has to then eventually be fed through the window of your technique when you're sprinting. And so if that window isn't optimized, you could spend an insane amount of energy making progress on a physiological level, on a strength level, on every level other than technique. If that technique window is the same size, you're only going to be able to send the same amount of energy through that window per second of the race. And so you've got to expand out from just general work, the general like grind set mentality, and you have to incorporate the technique alongside that. So yeah, by far, the technique is the number one determinant of all this type of stuff. It's not about volume in general. It's about volume of race-specific movement. And so, like if you're doing a lot of easy swimming, if the majority of your freestyle movement in the water is not at the 50 freestyle technique, then it's going to have a negative impact. Like it's like training for squats all year for a deadlift at the end of the year. It's like the slow, easy freestyle technique is different to the 50 technique. And so if you're doing like 90, 95, even 98% of your general training volume at that slow technique, it's just such an overwhelming overload of that movement pattern relative to the 51 that it's not doing you a service for any type of improvement.
Thank you so much, Cam, for taking the time today and joining me on the Athletes Only podcast.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
A big shout out to Cam for coming on the podcast and sharing his tips with all of you swim fans. Cam recently competed at the 2024 World Championships, where he narrowly took second place in the 50 freestyle by just 1/100th of a second. But I know this is only going to fuel him as he goes into the 2024 Olympic Games. Make sure to support Cam in his journey to the 2024 Olympic Games by showing him some love down in the comments below. And if you guys want to get access to my 40-minute unedited conversation with Cam McEvoy, where he talks about his swimming idols, training in Australia, and what's next for him after the sport of swimming, then make sure to become a member of my channel to get access to full Athletes Only episodes. And help support the channel too while you're at it. With that said, that's going to do it for this episode of the Athletes Only podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and I'll see you guys all next time.